7:30. Welcome councillors, officers, members of the public and press to tonight's cabinet meeting. I'm just going to take apologies for absence.
So we've had a shopping ban home, which is totally sorted.
Thank you. Yeah, he may be late. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Okay, fine. Minutes from the previous cabinet meeting. Russell. Hello.
Sorry, I'm sure I don't have to declare this, but my husband works for an organisation which I think is in current receipt of a partnership grant. I don't think I'm in credits.
It's better be safe than sorry.
I might just, I apologize, I'm just going to declare I work for Street Spanish in case that does come up in this conversation. All right.
Thank you very much. Any more for anyone? Nope. Okay, minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of November 2021. Are we okay for me to approve those minutes? Any matters arising from the minutes that have been swept away from me? Okay. Written questions from the public will not be notified of any. Written questions from councillors will not be notified of any of those. Item 7, petitions, we've not had any of those either. So we come on to item 8, forward work plan, pages 4 to 15 of the pack. Any questions on the forward work plan? Okay, so we're content to move on to item 9, corporate strategy, found on pages 16 to 45 of the pack. I imagine it's going to be fairly uncontroversial. What do you say, Councillor Vince? Okay, so I shall move that. Do we have a second? Thank you, John. Okay, so corporate strategy. It sets out our vision over the next few years of what this authority wants to achieve. If I can draw members' attention to Appendix A in the report, where I set out my vision statement at the very front of the document, where we set out our vision to regenerate the town centre and the wider town, where we are setting out our vision to promote community cohesion and work with our fantastic volunteers, charitable groups, faith groups, to ensure that, particularly after the pandemic, no one's left behind. We'll be working to ensure that we're a more efficient council that works with and supports local businesses, protecting and investing in our much like discretionary services, because we recognise the vital part they play in the life of our town and how much they're loved by our residents and indeed by, I would say, everybody in this room. And so we're working flat out to make sure that they're protected and improved. We set out our plan to deliver an ambitious council house building programme, where we intend to deliver a greater number of council homes. Our commitment to Harlow North and the Harlow Gilston Town project is outlined in this document. We're also setting out our vision for making us a more efficient authority and making us a more low tax authority, but recognising that that will not come at the cost of our discretionary services. We support the levelling up agenda and the fact that we are pushing for prosperity for all, and that goes to the heart of our community engagement strategy, which was able to move for our non-profit council It's underpinned by 4 strategic themes, which you'll see outlined on pages 23 through to 25. So we talk about how we wish to grow the economy, how we're going to achieve social cohesion, safeguarding our environment, which is key to what we do in our decision-making process, and we've put at the centre of our decision-making the need to move to net carbon emission by 2050. And again, we set out a 6-point plan on how we become a more efficient council. The document breaks down into each of the portfolio areas, where the portfolio holders have set out their vision for their particular portfolio, which is drawn from the overarching vision statement I've outlined, and is broken down into short, medium and long-term ambitions. Following that, there are strategic outcomes for each of the portfolio areas, so we have a point to measure against. And coming forward, following this will be a delivery plan that sits underneath this, which actually sets out how the officers will be delivering upon the strategies, the aims and overarching vision that this document outlines. So that's all I wish to say at the moment on corporate strategy. I'm going to take questions. Councillor Wills.
Thank you, Chair. Bearing in mind you're promising to become a lower taxing efficient council, if you're promising to lower council tax year after year to become a financially efficient and a low tax authority, bearing in mind over the medium term financial strategy, a freeze on council tax is likely to cut around £500,000 from the budget. Perhaps you could talk us through how you intend to do this without any cuts to vital services.
I think we had a similar discussion in the Cabinet previously where Councillor Swords was trying to outline the point of an overarching document and where it doesn't get into the specific details. I think he used park benches as an example of where they should and shouldn't go, and that wasn't the point of the document. The point of this document is to set out our overarching vision, and it's to set out what we intend to achieve year on year. This doesn't go into the detail of how we will deliver that at the moment. That will come in future. This is, shall we say, a command. It gives us a steer to the officers of where we're going. So in terms of where we're going to find those year-on-year efficiencies, that's borne out. The idea of bringing the corporate strategy now is so that it is ahead of our medium-term financial strategy, which will be coming later in the year, so the two are inextricably linked. Too often in the past, corporate strategy has kind of come after the medium-term financial strategy has been reverse engineered. So we're trying to do things the right way around by bringing the corporate strategy first, being clear on what we want to achieve. The medium-term financial strategy comes next. That sets out the affordability, and then you get the more detailed budget. So it actually moves in the right direction rather than trying to do everything backwards and then not being able to achieve very much at all. So it's very clear in the document that we do not intend to put at risk any discretionary services, but it's an aim of ours to make us a more efficient and lower tax authority. It doesn't set out ambitions for year on year, it just says that's our direction of travel. I just want to be absolutely plain about that. I noticed Councillor Charles gesticulating on that.
Just a question, if I may, without going into the detail of it, but whether in your vision you have a view that the only source of income for an authority is not simply higher taxes for residents.
Thank you. On that, we've set out that we're going to become a more commercially savvy council, looking for more commercial opportunities in everything that we do. So that may be from sharing services to looking at how we use the space in our town hall and everything in between. I do want to make absolutely plain that, because I believe this question's come up before in your positions. We'll make it clear. That doesn't mean we will be charging for the use of things like Pets Corner. Okay, those are much-loved services, they will remain free, and that certainly, I believe it's Councillor Clark has asked that question on a number of occasions, so I just want to make that absolutely plain, so that it's not muddled in anyone's mind. Any further questions? Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair. Just to reinforce what you've said there,
in my section of the corporate strategy is the ambition to pump prime the commercial activities of HTS, which is directly in line with what the Treasury Management will be, and your vision statement at the start of the corporate strategy, because in the medium and long term, this administration recognises the potential of HTS to realise some of those commercial ambitions you've strategically prioritised. Councillor Vince.
Sorry, to take over from Councillor Davis, I've got a few questions. I don't know if there's many as you normally ask, or probably not quite, but there's a few that I've got to ask, and you kind of give me a few extra ones from your response. Obviously, you spoke in your response about looking for corporate opportunities. Well, part of that, and again, I appreciate you may not be able to detail at this stage, but would you consider looking at outsourcing of services if necessary?
I think that needs to clearly define what we mean by outsource.
So, with services that we've got, for example, and just using an example, but near manning, let's get one, playhouse, anything like that, would you be looking at private companies coming in to run those and taking over those services? I'm not saying essentially those services, but I'm asking a more general point.
It's certainly not something that's been discussed in our shop, and I think that any, if we were to look at any service, and certainly haven't had discussions around those ones, we would need to see what was right for the service. So it's very hard to come up with specific answers to your question, because, as I say, this is setting out a direction of travel. But I suppose the short-term answer to what you're saying is no, we've not considered it.
Thank you.
Councillor Charles would like to.
Oh, sorry.
Just again, just to follow on what the chair has said, the administration, but previous administrations have embraced shared services with other local authorities, and actually that is, in terms of local government, something that has been deployed by many local authorities over the years, and is certainly something that we passionately advocate, because actually working with our neighbours not only makes sense politically, but also for those populations whereby you can achieve efficiencies by sharing those services that are important and critical to the delivery of those local communities.
Thank you. So, I take it then, sorry, in terms of the meat on the bones of this is the overarching, the actual meat on the bones of the detail. The first side of some of the detail will be in the budget next year. Is that correct?
As I say, the direction of travel is to set out the vision, what you wish to achieve in short, middle, and longer term. Then to have the MTFS aligned to those ambitions is then to deliver the budget. Underlying all of that is to actually come up with a service delivery plan, which allows the officers to be able to enact this, and then that can come down to team plans and individual tasks of particular officers. So it's about setting that out, because if we don't do this, nobody really knows what we want to do. So that's the intention of this document.
Obviously, just to say, obviously, page 41 of the document, I welcome the introduction of the governance portfolio. I recognise the importance of good governance in the council, which is probably best up in his role. Is this a recognition, Chair, that your predecessor got it wrong in removing the role in the first place?
There's a difference of approach, but the vision to regenerate our town, to lower council tax, to regenerate our estates, to promote greater community cohesion, to protect the environment, to build more council homes. That vision is exactly the same. I think the phrase is there's more than one way to skin a cat, and I saw that this was a good use of my portfolio holder's skill set, and that's why I've decided to set out my cabinet as I have. That argument could be made of any leader at any time. I believe you may have set up your shadow cabinet slightly differently to your predecessor. At least I hope you have. And it was very different to one of the former leaders I see there, and one of the former leaders you're talking on behalf of today. So we all have different ways of doing things, but the vision, the one that we stood on back in May, very much the same, and we're moving forward with that. Councillor Charles.
And what I would also say, Chair, this again complements the proactive and commercial approach, because the whole purpose of the governance brief is to look at how we deliver a procurement policy, one of the fundamentals of the governance brief. And if we are going to realise our commercial approach, we need to, in line with what the government is currently looking at in terms of wider procurement policy, recognise how we can achieve that, and also work with our supply chain partners to invest in the Harlow pound.
Any further questions, councillors?
Yeah, just one more still on the governance portfolio. Rob, you know, obviously I set my, and I've asked this partly based on what you just said. I mean, obviously I set my shadow team based on what how you set your portfolios. I just read on page 41 under the governance brief. It talks about you know, the thing we all agree on, which is climate change and the net zero emissions for council. Which, you know, as a previous administration, we went a long way to doing as well. I just wondered, is that now under the remit of the governance portfolio and moving away from the environment portfolio? I may have read it wrong, I just wanted just a general clarification.
One of the biggest ways we can impact what we do on the environment is what we purchase and the way we go about doing our business and the way we organise ourselves. And if we want that to cut across the entire organisation, it makes perfect sense to put that at the centre of governance so that it flows out and it goes across. If we leave it in one portfolio area, then we'll never achieve our aim to get to net zero by 2050. So it's at the centre of procurement. Procurement affects almost every single service across this organisation. So it's not so much that it sits just with governance, but governance allows it to be spread and permeate across the entire organisation. Yeah. Do you have any further questions, Councillor?
No, that's it. Thank you, Chair.
I believe Councillor Harvey has some questions. Councillor Harvey, who are you standing in for today?
What do you mean?
Who are you showing us?
I'm showing who I was. Do we need to be? Sorry, do we need to have you show a portfolio? I presume I'm showing Joel as I was.
Yeah, okay. That's what I'm just asking.
Oh, are you asking who I'm directing my questions at, because they're not necessarily from
No,
mine?
I was asking who you're shadowing. So
Oh, okay. Well, the same as I have been since we came to. So just a couple of questions. Firstly, Councillor Carter, forgive me, but I think you'll probably agree with me that the first thing this document needs is a really good proofread. I don't know if they come to this forum proofread or in draft version. I mean, they are draft insofar as I suppose you're going to approve it tonight, but it's riddled with typos, which I know are a symptom of officers being under a lot of pressure and you guys being under a lot of pressure to deliver a new plan, and I totally get that. And I'm been on the receiving end of that comment so many times I couldn't not bring it to the meeting tonight, and I'm sure you will spot them yourself if you haven't already. And on that note, I wanted to ask a question
Sorry,
about...
I thought you were asking a question.
Yeah.
So I'll answer your question if you like. If you'd like to submit what you've seen in typos to the officers, they'd be more than happy to take them.
I'm really sorry, I don't have that kind of time, I just know. I mean, I don't think Councillor Carter ever did it for us. I'm just making the point these things happen, and I'm sure it's
I thought
frustrating.
you were asking, so we are in a question session.
Yeah, so my question is, following on from the difficulty I had at points penetrating the copy, page 28, under short-term ambitions, working with local businesses, I just wanted to understand what this statement meant a little bit better. So work with local businesses to ensure there is a strengthened and one single organisation that is empowered to represent their best interests. Is that single organisation the council, or is it, I don't know, the Chamber of Commerce or a new body? I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah, so I was very pleased in the week to chair the business forum, and a vehicle that is being organised by the business community, which this council will support, because I think it's important to empower the business community to take the lead on these matters, and that we will support them. What is happening within the business community is they're organising themselves under one single banner. That's not for me to decide, it's for the business leaders in this town to carry that forward. So that was an acknowledgement in this on page 28. Forgive me for not clarifying that more, but it's because I couldn't take the lead on that, because the business leaders want to shape that new body to represent their interests in particular to respond to the challenges that we faced over the last 2 years, particularly the challenges that our retailers who are talking to us at the business forum have been struggling with. So we want to, of course, support and empower that organisation, but it's for them to lead that and us to support them.
So is there going to be a new organisation, a new entity created, or is it like a group that works together?
As I said, it's not for me to prescribe. The business leaders want to shape that. We will support whatever entity the business leaders want to create. We're very much supportive of a single entity if that's what they want to do. But I think it's important for me not to prescribe what the business leaders want as their representation. We here as a council to support their endeavours.
Okay.
I would add to that, the reason why we're making this part of our corporate strategy is we see that having a strong local economy is vital to the levelling up. And the last time we were in administration, this authority actually got awarded the Friendly Business Award from Small Business from the Chamber of Commerce for the work that we did. And
Sorry, Ross, I don't disagree for a second about the need to support businesses. That wasn't my question. So I just wanted to understand. Totally agree. I think it's terrific that you're doing that. This is a question. I did see when you said to Chris that there wouldn't be much to talk about or something when you opened this up, was going to smile, because actually I see so much content which is extremely familiar, which is activity which has been long under development, and it's really sound, good work that this council is progressing, and it's great to see it continuing. There are, of course, some marked departures, and that's quite right too. And the one I observed was the same one that Chris did, is obviously that your commitment to being a low tax authority, which is terrific. If you can keep those services, I think that that's a really good ambition. I don't think I wouldn't argue with that being a positive thing for residents. My question is, and I think you will probably say this is about the detail, but my question was going to be, develop the commercial element of building control. Does that mean, just as a layperson, I just wanted to understand, does that mean that people will be seeking to generate revenue from the services we provide to people who are having planning and building works done? Is that going to change that kind of offer, or is it a different thing?
Not entirely. It's looking at the whole way we offer that service and working with our local authority partners to see how we can make that more, shall we say, commercially savvy and generate income. But further detail will come forward on that. There's a lot of work in progress around that at the moment, but it'd be too premature to give you the detail of that.
Yeah, no, I understand. It's very clear that there's a direction of travel, and thanks for very loud and clear to me. Similarly, it's quite a big statement, the HTS Group commercial strategy, to talk about reimagining the direction of the group. It's a single sentence in the document, but that is quite a big ambition, and I wondered, are we going to see a new business plan, business model? Is that the kind of ambition that we're talking about, or is it,
Yeah, there's a whole raft of work that we'll do with HTS on a number of fronts, but I'll allow Councillor Charles to elaborate further on that.
I'll take myself to answer the question. Thanks, Councillor Harvey. I think there are a number of things that have happened. I'm really pleased that the shareholder subcommittee approved the scoping paper for the business plan. At the last shareholder subcommittee, covered in the forward work plan, is the commitment to produce full business plan in February. What's happening over the next few months, we've already had one of the strategic workshops, is that HS have commissioned an external consultant who's had a long career in local government and has a great deal of commercial experience to work not just with HS but the council to build out the business plan. Inevitably, and we'll see if you have a look at the Shell Committee previous papers, you'll see the shell of the commercial entity that we want to build. So there'll be things like considering a trading company so that HS can actually go out and win new business outside of Harlow. There's also a commitment to look at the potential for a development company so that it has the relevant skill set potentially covered in the scoping paper to build properties. So the direction of travel is really positive. I have to say, Bob Davis has done an awful lot of work. I know that Councillor Durkin as well is getting stuck in. But this is something actually on a cross-party basis that is really working. And I very much appreciate that it was your previous administration that kicked off HTS, but we're going to take it one step further with, I know, a very lofty ambition to reach out to the east of England. But we should aim high. I think we have the skill sets in this town to deliver on that promise, and that could potentially yield a greater return to the taxpayer.
Yeah, and I can see how that ambition, I think it was exciting, I don't mind conceding that, I thought it was very exciting, and I can see that that is going to give you the scale that you talk about, Lee. So I think I better shut up before I agree with you too wholeheartedly on too many points. But the realignment of the timing of this document, just to be clear, that has long been in play, so I'm really glad to see that happening. It makes a lot of sense. And also you mentioned working with other authorities. We already do that really successfully, I know, and it will be great to keep on doing that. So I was very excited by what I saw in here, apart from the typos.
Very much. Are there any further questions? Comments? Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. And you know, low tax efficient council sounds good, but is it achievable and is it realistic? The issue of lowering or freezing council tax, we're still waiting for you guys on that one. But the reality is the loss of that revenue is cumulative, and over the medium term, we're talking about a loss of, you know, around £500,000. You spoke in the document, well, I think it's Councillor Swords, if it wasn't, apologies, Councillor Swords, talking about not relying on council tax as revenue. Fair enough, and we've talked about, you know, the role that HHS can play in that. But you've also spoken in the document about not relying on government grants for funding of ongoing services. Perhaps you know something about the government cutting more about funding, I don't know. But I think we need to bear in mind. And look, we as an opposition want Harlow, and we want Harlow Council to be successful. We will watch with interest the service delivery plan and of course your budget in February. We will continue to scrutinise. I hope we scrutinise in a positive and, what's the word I'm looking for, constructive way. As Councillor Harvey said, you know, actually we made a joke about the document at the start, and, you know, I'm sure you've got plenty to say, and I did have plenty to say. But we don't necessarily disagree with the aims of the document. We just, sceptical is a bit too harsh a word perhaps, but sceptical about how you're going to implement it, and we want to really ensure that those vital services, I'm sure you do, but those vital services that our town, you know, love so much are protected as well. So I'll say no more on that. We wait for interest for the detail, and we will scrutinise you when it comes.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I welcome this corporate strategy. It is, I think, a detailed and informative roadmap strategically to set out in the next 3 years what this administration is going to do to pump primary efforts, not only to recover from COVID-19, but to build back better and take on the opportunities that are presented by the government's Levelling Up agenda. And we all eagerly await the Levelling Up white paper and what that will instruct local government. The ambition to be an efficient and low tax council is, there's no conspiracy there, is there, Chair? We have been consistent in the election campaign and in subsequent statements that we are a low tax party. And that commitment is set out in our corporate strategy. You will see, if I turn to my own brief of the new community and business resilience section, the commitment not only to address the challenges that have been manifest during the last 18 months, to support those voluntary organisations, charitable groups that have been there to confront the realities of the pandemic, but to also support our business community, to inject dynamism in this council around a commercial approach and use HTS and other potential commercial ventures that I know James and you, Chair, are championing, to make sure we reorientate this council around a medium-term financial strategy that has some key principles. One, yes, the commerciality, but two, thinking outside of the box and not just relying on government funding to achieve our ambitions. If we are going to be a major player in the east of England, we need to aim higher than just the realities of the local government settlement. We need to reach out, we need to use a dynamic commercial strategy that is being led by James and the Chair to ensure that we leave a lasting legacy for our community to prosper. And right front and centre in the Chair's forward is this commitment to extend not only prosperity, but also to deliver greater resilience. That is fundamental to the challenges that this community and many others in this country face at this moment in time. And that's why I think being forward-thinking, committing a detailed plan, setting out strategies, which I have to say hasn't been reflected by the previous administration, who had no ambition for this town. We do, we have a clear plan, we have a strategy, and we're getting on, frankly, with the job.
Councillor Salt.
Well, thank you. It's not been as widely scrutinised as I was expecting, which I presume is because, as a few of you said, there was so much to welcome. I'm astounded that you would question an ambition to be a low tax authority, because if you don't have an ambition to be a low tax authority, what is the ambition to be a high tax authority? Of course, as details come, the budget and medium-term financial strategy is the appropriate time to do that. But you've got the commitment that no frontline services will be cut, and you've got a commitment that we will be a low tax authority, so adding 2 and 2, you won't get 5, you will get the fact that we're going to be an efficient authority. But I want to focus my remarks mainly on regeneration, of course, and I strongly welcome the corporate strategy. I think it's a fantastic news story, and it does something that I think is needed doing for such a long time, namely, and to quote what you said in the press recently, Chair, to shift our efforts in regenerating our town from low to high gear, because as much as it can be spoken about, and has been spoken about in this chamber, it hasn't happened. And this document sets out very clearly what building back better really means. Building a new wave of council properties for Harlow families, not talking about it, but doing it. Rebuilding our town centre so that it truly is one of the best in the country, renewing our estates and restoring pride in them, delivering a fantastic cycle track network independent from the road network, making sure that our planning system is fit for purpose and encourages home improvement, and above all, delivering on the pledges we made to this town. Because as I've said far too long, I think the questions of regeneration and renewal have been ignored. In all corners of the town you can see it, but this document sets out a very clear ambition to change that, and of course further announcements and delivery plans will follow that will set out the detail of doing so. But you know, to anyone that questions the ambition, I would say that you are barking well up the wrong tree, because we don't underestimate the scale of the task. But you know, to those that say they've tried before, I would say the doubters and the doomsters and the naysayers, that those who are betting against Harlow and our ambition for it are going to get it wrong again. But far more importantly than anything else I've said, and again to quote you, Chair, this is not just another document designed to gather dust, but a clear statement of intent that this council, working with local enterprise, charities, volunteer groups, partner organisations, and all of our people, will truly transform Harlow.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkinson.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, a lot's been said about visions tonight and new aspirations going forward, but the important part of any corporate strategy is the delivery of it. Anyone can have a vision. I'm sure there's thousands of people in this town every week that have a vision of winning the lottery. Maybe that would happen. We all have visions. It's the delivery is how we will be judged. And all I've seen so far tonight is some absolutely splendid, super duper vision. When Councillor Vince asked you about detail, you have none. When Councillor Vince asked you about how you're going to finance this going forward, you couldn't answer the question. You haven't got that kind of detail yet. So it's fine having a really super duper vision where apparently people are going to move from all over the world to move to Harlow. That's fantastic aspiration to have that people be flocking all over the world to come and live in Harlow. You'll be judged not by people in this chamber, you'll be judged by people in this town. And you know, this has come from an administration that gave an aspiration 7 months ago that there'd be an immediate council tax cut. And the people in this town have still not had it. It should have happened 7 months ago. So I take, and I welcome any vision, I welcome anything that will move our town forward. I just have some scepticism whether it's actually, this will be deliverable. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Harlow, your hand up to make a comment.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just really going to say much the same thing, Councillor Sword. I don't want anyone to ever think that we didn't have ambition for this town. We did, and we do. We are excited by the vision. I was quite unapologetic about saying I thought what you put forward is exciting and has a vision. But I do think, come on, you've been sitting here for 7 months. You haven't done a single thing, and no one would expect you to. So I think the argument that we didn't deliver doesn't hold any water until such time as you have.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sawers, allow Councillor Harlow to make her comments.
No, that's fine. Thank you. You don't need to patronise me, Councillor Karen, thanks.
No, it wasn't patronising, I was giving you the right to speak, it was your turn to
Okay.
speak. That's
Thank
what
you.
the chair of the organisation does. Councillor Leppard.
Yes, I think it's quite interesting to hear the former administration express cynicism, scepticism. Hardly surprising, given that we've been in office for 7 months versus 10 years, I think. That there is something that the main point is, although we're not giving out all the details now, I think you seriously underestimate how much work we've been undertaking since we came into office, looking at how we're going to deliver this. We have some pretty good ideas, and we've done quite a lot of in-depth research. Don't underestimate it for one moment. There's a plethora of examples of commercialisation with lots of far abler authorities than we've had in this town. There's also huge numbers of examples of successful regeneration, including by certain Labour councils as well, which we're also looking at. Sometimes clarity comes when somebody looks slightly outside the box, and I think you will see that our vision will translate into reality far sooner and far more successfully than you anticipate.
Great.
Thank you, Councillor Leppard. Seeing no further comments, I'll pass them up. I've heard much tonight about surprise shock, but also welcoming the vision, which is the point. And I think that's been sorely missing in the past. If you do not have a vision, you cannot create a delivery plan. If you cannot create a delivery plan, you cannot price it. If you cannot price it, you cannot do it. And this is what this sets out. If we didn't move this document, nothing else would move forward because we'd still be in a situation where the status quo maintained. We've set out a credible alternative, we've set out a vision for regeneration. This town has been in decline in its estate for a great many number of years. It is a great town, but it is looking tired, and I've said this a number of times. But we have to start somewhere. We have to start by setting out where we wish to prioritise our efforts, where we wish to go in the future. If we don't set this out, there will be no house building programme. There will be no regeneration. There will be no tax efficient authority. It'll just be lurching from one budget to the next, which is what's happened for the past decade. And that's why I think some of the questions from the opposition, or some of the mock surprise, is probably because they haven't been in charge. They haven't governed. They had very little understanding of governance. In order to govern, you have to set out what you want to happen. This is it. The delivery plan will come next. Now, it should be no surprise, I mean, to a former leader of the council and to an opposition leader, that you cannot move a budget mid-year without causing a great deal of confusion, a great deal of expense. Never in the election was I quoted as saying that we would move an immediate tax cut. I said we would immediately review the council's finances, and we've even put out qualifying statements to the effect. Budgets come in January towards the end of February. We need a medium-term financial strategy to do that. But I have moved shadow budgets in the past where I've shown where efficiencies could be made. There's nothing inconsistent about that. Okay? What we're getting is a lot of hype and hysteria around the fact that, oh, it's a vision, but nothing else. It's all just words. Well, you've got to start with the vision, and the vision is very plain. We're going to regenerate the town. We want to regenerate the town because with the new Harlow Gilston Garden Town coming along, I think the phrase being used is a donut effect, where we have this lovely shiny new development going around Harlow, but the middle will be older, it'll be trapped in this donut type shape. We want to regenerate from within and out, because that's what the people that live in this town deserve. That's what we need. We all live here, we all want to see it look better, and that's what this document clearly sets out. So it sets out a clear vision around the environment. It sets out that we want to regenerate our estates. It sets out the fact that we want to build more but better council homes. It says that we want to meet our net carbon zero commitment. We want to do that in a more tax efficient way. We want to work with outside authorities. And that's what this document clearly sets out. And it sets out clear, achievable, smart targets to do that. And I think the one thing I have heard across the piece is the fact that it's very clear what it wants to set out, what it wants to do. So I hear you when you say, well, we'll be judged on what we deliver. Well, this is the first stage of that delivery. Okay? And the medium-term financial strategy will come, and the budget will come, and then we will be judged. And I think we will be judged very well on what we achieve. Because as Council Level says, there's a great deal of work going on in the background to make sure that these things are realised. And a number of things have happened so far. So we have pushed forward with the Equalities, Diversities and Inclusivity policy, which under your previous administration was started. We have moved forward with the Community Resilience Strategy, which has 6 pillars there. We have moved forward in supporting our local businesses with grants. We have looked at supporting local sports outlets with the football grants that we've put out, and a whole host of other things besides. So it's not like we've been sitting around doing nothing, but this now sets out a clear strategic vision that we will deliver upon. And so to that end, I move to recommendations A and B. All those in favour?
Great, thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Right, moving on to the next item on the agenda. Joint Finance and Performance Report, Port 2, page 46 to 72. I look to Councillor Leppard to move that.
Yes.
And I shall second that. Councillor Leppard, would you like to introduce the report on pages 46 to 72 at the back?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Considering the overall environment we've operated in this quarter in the pandemic, the overspend, or the cumulative overspend for the year so far of 252,000 against the general fund budget shouldn't cause too much of a concern per se. I mean, this overspend is the cumulative charge against the £1.5 million budget resilience reserve that was set up precisely for this purpose, and it will continue to remain in place for future eventualities. In this, I think that it's quite worthwhile just setting out the situation we're in. Clearly, we're working towards the budget now, and vigilance is going to be required regarding any future demands as this pandemic is far from over, and also we don't know the impact yet of any government reviews. Looking at the main causes of the overspend, I mean, they are almost directly attributable to the pandemic. We forfeited anticipated rental income on the Nexus for about 602,000. Fortunately, that will be allayed going forward as 2 new tenants are in there, and although we had to extend the rent-free period for an extra month, we anticipate 530,000 next year, which could even be more if the remaining block is rented. Where there is more cause for concern is on the car park income, principally, which is almost 356,000 below expectation, below budget. In the case of the water gardens, although we're starting to see an uptick now as shoppers have come back, the water gardens car park does include a number of season ticket holders who work in the town centre. And given the continuation of people working from home or the hybrid, that is not coming back as quickly as we hope. Possibly it may never come back in that format if work patterns change. So we need to look at that, at an alternative strategy there. The overall reductions then, offsetting these shortfalls, was partly the COVID recovery grant, which is great, 459,000. The other part which worries me more is the 410,000, which were savings from staff vacancies which are not being filled. And we currently have, I've been informed, 15 active searchers. Now, of course, they will be hopefully recruited at some time, and so we will not be able to rely on that 410,000. Which then brings us right back to the corporate strategy, which Councillor Perrin has been explaining. The importance of a robust commercialisation plan. We must develop alternative income streams. as adopted by many other councils. That cannot be understated. A number of initiatives are under review. We will not go into them now, and they will be announced in due course. However, I want to reiterate, as Portfolio Board for Finance, I want it on the record that our commercialisation does not, under any circumstances, contemplate charging for admissions to Pets Corner, the museum, or any of the other cherished services that we have. On the contrary, successful commercialisation will enable us to develop and generate revenue streams that will support those services, that will make us less reliant on tax, and will enable us to invest further in them. That's the key objective for us in that regard. Another thing that stands out which is linked to the commercialisation, is the issue of council properties, investment properties, commercial properties. We have very, very few in this town. And when I was reading the supplementary paper to this from the previous finance holder, it stated that at the time, the council had never used the Public Works Loan Board to take loans to buy commercial properties. I wonder if they ever regretted that. Unfortunately, that window is now closed, but it's still open for regeneration operations, and we will seriously be looking at that. Had we made that choice at the time, we might be in a much stronger financial position today. However, one needs to think and have a certain, let's say, entrepreneurial spur to consider such business. And this administration certainly has that. We will not allow such opportunities to go by. If you'd like any discussion on the performance measures, I'm happy to do that, unless they're self-explanatory.
Thank you, Councillor Lepard. Any questions at all? Councillor Vince.
Thank you, Chair, and we welcome Councillor Lepard to his new role.
Thank you.
Slightly politically born in some of that speech, I felt, but we'll let it go. This is just generally some questions with regards to the report, and I'm not trying to catch up, it's generally just some clarification on a few things. Page 47, it says that 4 milestones have been suspended. I couldn't find anyone in the document any detail of what those 4 milestones were. Obviously, I appreciate you don't know the things past now, if you have those right to me.
Can I come back to you?
Yeah, that's right. Mr. Freeman knows, but I'm happy to come back to another meeting, that's fine.
Thank you. Do you have any second question?
I've got, because I did it with Councillor Doug, I've got a few.
Do you want to, if they're quite technical, do you want to rattle off maybe 2 or 3?
Should I just go through, I'll go through them then if that's, I'll go through, that's fine. So, page 54 talks about vacancies in contact centre. Obviously, a situation which obviously has an impact on call waiting times. Obviously, positive news that that the recruitment has happened now. I just want to know sort of time frames. Are we confident that all the staff are trained? Are they going through training at the moment when that training is completed? And I guess I'm just concerned really on page, related to that, page 69 talks about 5 vacancies in contact Harlow at the same time or on a very short time scale, which obviously doesn't help when you've got a higher number of calls for obvious reasons. I just wondered, if we identified the reasons that we've had such a high turnover in that department. Mr. Hill's not the only one.
Okay. Specifically on that department, I'll have to come back to you.
I was going to say, Councillor Lepard, on that particular point, maybe Councillor Dunn might be able to shed some light.
Two were internal transfers to jobs that were in places in the council. 2 left the council, and we've had pregnancy there.
You have any further questions, Councillor?
I do. Just very thank you to Mr. Freeman who did there's less because I've asked a few already, so thank you for explaining to me process change events, so thank you for that. Obviously, overspend of £250,000. and I appreciate that the hope is that that will sort of be caught up in the next quarter. It says the council sets aside £1.5 million of funding to support the budget, manage the uncertainty of ongoing impact from the COVID pandemic, and again, a total separate question, but where's that 1.5 million coming from?
I think that was actually set up under the previous.
Yeah,
I was going to ask you the same question.
I thought she captured Dad's isn't here at all.
Sorry.
No, I think that's it.
Well, it showed remarkable foresight.
Would you like to say that again?
We actually set aside more than half an hour budget, I think. Any further questions on the outcome report? Councillor Harlow, then Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Councillor Ledford, thank you very much for that overview. I wanted to ask a question about timing, and it's, I guess, linked to the strategy. We're in, I think, even more uncertain territory than we thought we would be now. You know, the variant's really thrown a curveball, and I don't know about anybody else here, but I'm starting to think that actually recovery is going to be even more stop-start, longer, protracted, less, more uncertain than we really thought. And I think actually the certainty that abides is uncertainty, and actually that's probably positive in some respects. So I guess one of my questions was around timing, and I was going to ask you with regards to the strategy document, what was the timing of short, medium and long term in terms of, you know, what is that, is short term 6 months? Because it strikes me that there is quite a distance between what we've got in this report and where the vision and aspiration of the strategy wants to be. And my question is around, do you see that as a problem? And I guess more to the point, are you concerned about, you know, the employment market being very challenging at the moment, the uncertainty of COVID, the, you know, unpredictable patterns of usage of the commercial opportunities that the council has for making income from, you know, are you, I mean, prepared to concede that, you know, the picture painted in the performance report doesn't tie up with where you want to be and what time frame you want to be? I don't quite know.
If I may, one thing I've learned, particularly working in local government, is that the future's never been certain. It's been uncertain ever since I walked into this chamber. Every year there's always been some uncertainty of some description or another. Pandemic, obviously, is a new uncertainty. However, I would say that I feel less certain about the future if the vaccine programme hadn't been as successful as it was, is, and continues to be, and I might just use this as an opportunity to encourage anybody that might be caring to tune in tonight to go and get their booster jabs, and if they haven't had their first and second jab, to do that, because that's the one major uncertainty in all of this, is how we're going to fare coming out of this pandemic. And the vaccine at the moment has been a very strong part of making sure we're on a strong road to recovery. I don't quite share your, shall we say, your view that perhaps there's a disjointness between the Q2 joint performance report and our corporate strategy and our outcomes and our aims and our visions. We can see many of the trends are in a positive direction in that outturn report, and as I believe Councillor Nicholas says, we are continuing to look for many new innovative ways of working, and that never stops. So I don't share quite the pessimism that you may share, but as I'll finish where I started, it's always been uncertain, and the fact of the matter is, if we can prepare for that uncertainty, such as putting aside a suitable reserve for that uncertainty, and make sure that we're working to become more efficient, making sure we're improving our services, making sure we're working with neighbouring authorities to look at the latest innovative practices in government, and then I think we can put ourselves in the best place possible to respond to the challenges the future may throw at us. I'll make way for Councillor Ledford if he has anything further to add to that point.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I take your point, but I think you mentioned in your question, for example, the water gardens car park. I think we have to be careful not to fall into the trap of being too myopic, looking at just what we have today. Councillor Perrin has mentioned, there are many ways of, even notwithstanding the pandemic, of creating efficiencies or savings or generating revenues. Here, for example, shared services in procurement. There are over 680 shared services agreements with authorities just in England alone. And we've looked at quite a few of them. These are not impossible to do. I mean, it's the trend, it's the way forward. These are the sorts of things we have to embrace. And so I also do not see reasons for pessimism. Yes, caution, yes, vigilance, yes, serious consideration, mitigation, but we should not be frightened of the future. We can determine our own future to a far greater extent than we probably have done in the past, and you think we possibly can.
Yeah, and please don't misunderstand me. My questions are not around. I don't doubt, or I mean, I do doubt, but it's not to question or dampen. It was really quite a practical question around timeframes. And may I ask, Chair, for clarification around short-term, mid-term, and long-term going back? I mean, is that like a 12 months, 3-year, 5-year, or?
The corporate strategy extends over a 3-year period.
So long term is 3 years, short term is 1, and medium is 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Great.
Any further questions on? Oh yes, sorry, Councillor Wilkinson. Did I forget?
If you could. My question is on housing, up to Councillor Carter, page 53 of the reports. I have given notice of the question, by the way. My question is in the report it clearly states that although temporary accommodation has remained static through Q1 and Q2, it's expected to be an increase of 10% in numbers in temporary accommodation throughout the year as the government eases COVID-19 lockdown arrangements. I personally think that 10% could be higher, that's just a personal opinion. But my question to Councillor Carter is he confident that the council is in a good place to handle a lot more temporary accommodation coming through the front door? Clearly his own report clearly is going to be happening. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Joe. I'm afraid Councillor Wilkinson has fallen into the same trap that I've often fallen into. We haven't actually reached the HRA yet. We're still talking about the general fund. But I'm quite happy to answer the question now it's here. As previous speakers have already mentioned, we are extremely vigilant at the moment. We are watching the situation almost on a day-by-day basis. And we have long anticipated this rise coming forward, and we are working very closely, very hard with the private rented sector, particularly owners of houses, one area that is HMOs, but also other landlords as well, which we have been doing for some time as a way of finding temporary accommodation. Fortunately, we have got a number of good relationships already, and we are confident that certainly within the 10% parameter that we will be able to cope. But we're not resting on that 10%. We are continuing looking for more and as many ways as possible of finding accommodation.
Any further questions?
Oh, sorry, I just wanted an update on the signing off of the accounts. I think the audited accounts are still not signed from those past 2 years.
Thank you for that. Yes, they're not. We've been discussing this with Simon Freeman here. The issue is dependent on an interpretation of the accounting for pensions of HTS. It's an issue that will probably be defined early in the new year. I can't really go into further detail because it's been some discussions with the auditors, and as you know, we are in the process of changing the public auditors. So we will have more news on that early in the new year. I think that's as much as I can say at this stage.
Thank you.
swear time. Any further questions on reports, councillors?
I was going to do it as a statement, but to be fair, it's only fair to give you a right to reply on this. I mean, it was just, I appreciate the increase in complaints can be to an extent attributed to COVID, or quite largely attributed to COVID. But I note on the report, and I won't read all of it out, but you know, if you compare quarter 2 of this year to the quarter 2 of the previous year, when COVID was also with us sadly, that's an increase of 36.1% number of complaints received. So in the last 12 months, there's been an average of 121 complaints per month, whereas the previous 12 months, although part of that would have been COVID, the monthly average was 90. And that's an increase, again, I'm just reading the report, sorry, 34.4. I just wondered your thoughts on, because I appreciate COVID part of it, but I wondered is it because of where we are in COVID, is it because of the HCS has got back to do some of the things, and that's why the complaints increased. So I did want to give you, I was going to say this as a comment, but actually I'll give you the opportunity just to sort of give us a response to that. James.
Thank you. I'm sure another portfolio holder is probably more qualified to answer that than I am. But my only statement will be, yeah, it's unacceptable, really. It's certainly not up to standard, and we're trying to improve it.
I would just add that you can see towards the end of quarter 2, what looked like was a peak in complaints actually now subsiding and coming down under control.
So I just come back to that. I mean, is there, in terms of, and I appreciate your honesty in that, James, and the rest as well, is there any, I know we've talked about the staffing of the contact centre, and not be part of it, but are there any strategies that you're putting in place or have put in place to kind of bring those complaints down?
Yeah, I mean, that is the overall what the complaints are telling us on page 56, but if you look at each individual KPI, as it were, as we go through the performance charts, it says what the next steps are to bring those back under control. So I think that's given us the global picture, which you're quite right, but underneath that are the individual things we're doing in each area to try and bring that back under control. So it's not one thing, it's several things that are being put in action to try and bring that back under control.
May I just add to that as well? I mean, just to give you some examples. One of the areas where there have been complaints was regarding payment of invoices, where our target is payment in 30 days. And one of the main reasons for delayed payment is linked, it's based on the process we use and the people we have. Now, the people are furloughed, and the process involves actually delivering the invoices to somebody's desk, but there's nobody sitting at that desk. Then it doesn't get dealt with, so that causes a delay. What has happened is, this is now, the finance areas have reviewed this, and they've set in place new scanning procedures so that staff working remotely can operate. So it has brought challenges which have had to require different responses in different areas. I just want to give that one as an example.
Any further questions? Okay, if I may, we've had quite a number of comments on this. If it's nothing novel, I'm going to move to the vote. You've got something to say?
I'll be very, very quickly then, and I just wanted to make a comment. You mentioned, and the reason I mentioned it because it's quite important, actually our 2 predecessors also agreed very strongly with this, which was about the vaccination process. And, you know, just to touch on and join with you in you know, whoever's listening on your Harlow, you know, please go out and get your booster jab. It will really make a difference when you get to Christmas. So I just want to send my support, and you know, much like our predecessors, anything I can do to work with you yourself to promote that, and to do so.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so if we move to the recommendations on page 46. Recommendation A noted the projected outturn position set out in sections 3 and 4 of the Appendix Access report for the second quarter, July to September of 21-22 as follows. 1. A projected overspend of £252,000 representing 0.4% of the gross general fund budget. And 2. The council performed on or above target for 40 out of 46. There's 87% of its monthly and quarterly key performance indicators, and successfully completed 14 out of the 59, or 24% of its service milestones. Can I see those all in favour? Thank you. Okay, moving to pages 73 and 79 of the pack, that's the Housing Revenue Account, Quarter 2 Finance Report. I look to Simon Carter. to move that?
Thank you, to move that forward.
Thank you. And can I have a seconder for that report, please? We've got two people competing. This is Councillor Leppard on that one. Thank you very much. Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. The HRA is its usual complex setup with both capital and revenue spending. I'll focus primarily on the operational side. It's despite all the pressures, which are already tonight, I think the HRA is doing remarkably well. There is a forecast overspend of £82,000 for the end of the year, based on operational budget of 32 million, which for us is extremely good financial draw, and for which I command or commend our staff and the accounting staff. One of our newer focuses has been running for a year or two is on prevention of homelessness. The government has made this one of their priorities, and they are pouring quite a lot of money into it, enabling us to do a lot more work, both in identifying rough sleepers first of all, supporting streets to homes with outreach workers and supporting tenancies, the result is that the number of rough sleepers has been falling continuously. The last count, I think, was in October, when there was only one person sleeping well, which is the lowest number it's been since we ever counted those, since we did the census on those, which is quite a few years now. So, that is that's some good news. One of the other interesting features is we also took over the running of the Learning Centre in this quarter. Unfortunately, they're headed towards a budget shortfall, obviously because of the COVID and a lower number of people attending. We are beginning to turn this around. We are attracting more customers, and we are looking at sort of better ways of providing that service. There's some investment going into VMA. Recently opened a brand new professional kitchen, I suppose that's the way of describing it, all very gleaming, lots of pots and pans. And we will be looking, when circumstances permit, to have other events and things down there as well. I think very well. We're also investing 72,000 in a new minibus, which hopefully will be coming on in the next 3 months again as business picks up. The big thing, of course, in the HRA is rent collection. That's always been a concern, but the housing staff have been doing remarkably well in keeping in contact with our tenants and providing support where it's necessary, making sure they're getting all the right benefits and so forth. So collection rate remains in the top. Top 10% of collection rates anyway, about 98%, and it has been consistent all the way through the COVID. And so again, it's another commendation to the housing staff for the work they're doing on that. If you do go into the detail of the report, we are expecting a shortfall actually of around 112,000 on rent collected. This is mainly due to the number of void properties we have, which are far higher than forecast. We weren't expecting them to go away when those forecasts, when you did those forecasts actually. But we're working very closely with Streets to Home in order to bring down the turnaround times of 150. Always at the moment we're aiming for much more than that. On the capital side, there's some adjustments going on as we profile the housing pipeline. We are trying to catch up as far as possible on the major works. There's another coming on later on the agenda, and then there's another host of contracts coming up towards the end of the year, where we're actually sort of getting back into the swing of actually getting the work done. We're now reaching the stage where we are limited by the number of professional staff we have to actually oversee or oversee these contracts, which is an issue. But we are working as fast as we can, and obviously sort of spending, the relative amounts of money. But I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. Any questions on the report? Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. I just have the one question on page 74, bullet point 3 around the housing recovery plan. Obviously, it's going well. I don't think we all welcome the fact that the recovery plan put together by the last administration is going well in Q2. My question to Councillor Carter is, how does he see the recovery plan on housing going in question on Q3 and Q4?
Sorry, would you mind just repeating it?
Yeah, sorry.
Your question.
My question is the recovery plan is going very well at the moment. In Q2, how do you see the recovery plan going in Q3 and Q4?
The answer is not yet. Due for a meeting next week with HDS to review that.
Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Ince.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just trying to find the part of the report, but I believe it's on page 74. It's a savings on the cost of a tenant survey of £34,000. I presume the tenant survey is a survey of tenants to see if they're satisfied with the survey. Now, I completely understand why a tenant survey wasn't done in this particular period of time, but I just wondered what plans there might be to get feedback from tenants, particularly with those who might not necessarily have access to online facilities.
Councillor Carter.
The short answer is yes, and we will be sorting it in as soon as is practical, which is probably not over the Christmas and New Year period.
Any further questions on the report? Okay, can I take any comments?
Only that I'm glad I declared that interest earlier.
I believe Councillor Carter, David Carter, is just coming back there. Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think some congratulations should go to the team that run the rent office. During the COVID period, they've kept the welfare panel numbers down. And last month, we got to the stage where this month in December, the welfare panel is not sitting due to the fact we have no business. So those officers who have been collecting late rents, overdue rents, in my opinion, have done a really good job and deserve some credit for that.
The Marshal will pass with Director of Housing and comments in that regard. Any further comments? Councillor Cross, I'm going to leave it to you to sum up on this report.
I haven't really anything to add. I was referring that the quarter 1 and quarter 2 have been proceeding reasonably well, but we're now going to be moving into more difficult waters, particularly over homelessness and social homelessness, as the restrictions on eviction and court cases is lifted. It is still taking quite a while to actually get a court hearing, but this is going to be moving forward. So we are aware it's going to happen. We have been making preparations and contingency plans to actually deal with it, including, of course, finding additional accommodation. On the plus side, where we are with particularly with our sleepers, particularly this time of year, we have done remarkably well, and we see that good level of service continuing.
Thank you. And very pleasing Okay, so I'm going to move to the vote. I'm going to take recommendation A, the Report to Housing Revenue Account budget monitoring report as set out in the following paragraphs and appendix 1, and B, that the forecast HRA general working balance as set at the 31st of March 2022 will be 7.055 million. That carried.
Agree.
Thank you. Moving on to capital programme, Q2 finance report 2021 to 22 on pages 80 to 88 of the pack. Again, I refer back to you, Councillor Carter.
Right. Thank you.
Are you moving to the report?
Yes, please.
Yeah, can I see a second of that? Councillor Sauce. Councillor Carter.
Thanks, Chair. This is, again, a fairly complex report with a lot of moving, well, a lot of big numbers moving about. It is split into two, both both on the housing side and the non-housing side. I'll restrict my comments to the housing side. As I alluded to earlier on, a lot of the capital programme has been delayed because of the COVID programme, the COVID outbreak. We are now beginning to move back, but it does mean that some of the work a lot of work has been planned. We can't all do it this year, so some more will be moved forward to next year, which is why we have such large numbers moving about. There's been some reprofiling of the pipeline, as mentioned in the recommendations. We're looking to a current budget just on the housing side of £38.9 million this year, which is quite a lot of money, and which we're not expecting to achieve. We're looking to reprofile about 11 million of that until next year. But as I say, there's still a lot of work coming down the line, and the money will be spent. As mentioned in the HRA report, there will be to the end of the year about 7.4 million, which sounds quite a lot of money, but probably around half of that is destined for government programmes in the following year. The HRA works to a minimum amount of about £3.5 million, because we are building reserves for fire safety works post Grenfell Tower. So, I could go into all the detail of the reports, but the detail is there. And if anybody else has any other questions, we are going to ask. But that's the housing side. I'm sure my colleague will go talking through the non-housing category.
I think, if I may, Councillor, what we'll do is we'll move into questions, as the report's been moved, and then if any questions come up around the finance side, we can direct them to yourself. Any questions on the report?
Thank you, Chair. I again only have one question on page 81, recommendation I. My question is to Councillor Carter. Bearing in mind that when he was in opposition, he questioned me regularly on the cost of bringing council houses back on Pegland Street, and at the same time certainly supportive. He regularly questioned me on value for money. My question is does he consider spending £180,000 on one property now suddenly is value for money?
Councillor Carter.
Thank you. One of the benefits of actually sitting in the seat is you have access to a lot more information. For the hill, it was a very complex demolition because it was one half of a semi-detached house, and the building had to be demolished whilst the resident was still in the neighbouring property. So we couldn't bring down the big board. brick by brick right next to the house. So that was one issue. One of the other, another issue that was discovered is the water table is very high, and we're having to sink deeper piles to provide a foundation for it. So yeah, all these things have to be looked at. Some are going to be value money, some aren't. So that was a particularly useful piece of work because the house was going to have to come down anyway. So we could either just demolish the house at an important expense, or spend a lot more and build 2 more houses, which presume was the decision that you reached as well.
Any further questions? Comments? Okay, in that case, what I'll do is I'll move the recommendations, and I'm going to take recommendations A through to J on block. Can I see those in favour? Thank you very much. Okay, right. In the absence of Councillor Hardware being here, we're going to go to adoption of Harlow design guide pages 89 to 179. I'm going to move that report. Councillor Swords? And then Councillor Swords, I think you're going to speak mostly to the report itself. And we'll see how we fare with the questions between us. Councillor Swords.
Yeah, so it follows, as you will well recall, I'm sure, the original document that came to Cabinet in July, subsequently went out for consultation. Consultation ended in October. We had a high number of responses as the covering report sets out. I won't speak too long on the item, but I think it's a very strong document that brings some very welcome changes to the Council's planning policies, which of course will, pending the fact we hope it will be approved this evening, will be used as material considerations going forward. I don't think there should be anything in this report that anyone would speak against, more minor changes that have been made. I seem to recall when the SPD was brought to the July Cabinet and cross-party support, so I can't see any reason there would not be such support this evening. That's all I have to say on that.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any questions on Councillor Vince?
So I'm not the first position, but yeah, I think this is a good document. I think it was a necessary document. My only sort of question, query, whatever you want, if you like, it was just reminded me to say that Councillor Morris said in the audit about the problem with council speak. And look, I appreciate this is a planning document for far more intelligent people than me, but just a few sentences which I just thought, I don't know what that means. At a street level, tall buildings should have a successful human scale interface which should be active and engaging, but with a contextual visual strength to anchor the building to the street. Visual and spatial interaction with wider surrounding areas is also encouraged. Could you explain to me what that means?
Could you assist us by telling us what page you're
Oh
on?
yes, sorry, do apologise, Chair. Yes, it's page 106, 1.36.
106. Yeah, please do.
Well, I don't think anyone would want to see a very tall building, as described by this SPD, with a ground level that does not interact with the street, i.e. perhaps we, while walking past, we want to be dazzled by a wonderful shop front, or something on the ground floor, rather than just a plain wall. So what the document sets out, and the sentence you've just recalled, identifies essentially that it would be a material consideration for any such tall building to have for want of a better word, an interactive ground floor. And it wouldn't just be a brick wall on the ground level. There may be a shop front or a restaurant or a beautiful design on the ground floor.
I think we could get into rewriting for us and do it. And on the statement, it's quite useful actually, I'm going to go for the whole document and say that. But page 105, 1.27, where the development site, I get this a little bit more. The lowest elevation of proposed element should be measured to ensure. No, actually, no, ignore me, that didn't make sense. That's fine. Carry on, Jeff.
sometimes these things aren't always written in the most intuitive way, but they're written in such a way to make sure that we don't end up with brick walls on ground floors, and that's why it's written.
Yeah, and just to come back, Chair, I will probably, if Councillor Swords and Mr. Bramger are happy, I may well send a few more your way just to fire on way. Thank you.
But I understand sometimes the language on things can seem a little impenetrable, so that it does what we want it to do. Are there any further questions on this report? Councillor Lepard.
Thank you, Chair. We've long awaited this document and it's most welcome. Just, I would appreciate if you can just make clear to all and sundry, this now becomes a material consideration for any applications in the town centre, in the new extended designated town centre.
Yeah, this is a separate document, of course, the one that we brought forward, I believe at the last cabinet, if not the, I think it was the last cabinet, on the town centre master plan, and for any of those that weren't at the wonderful briefing last night, I'd encourage you to dig up a clip of it or something, because it was a strongly welcome document. This document laid out, of course, extends across the town, and yes, in direct answer to your question, all of these things will now be material considerations in when these things come to committee.
Thank you.
Okay. There being no further questions and comments. Councillor Lewis.
No, I'm just very good. I did look at the document quite detailed, so it's understood. Just, I think it's page 113, 3.4. Allow standard may be considered appropriate for cycles within 10 minutes walking distance or 100 metres to provide for alternative appropriate and accessible multifunction green space. I was just urging the council caution on lowering standard if it wasn't wholly necessary, but that was just a general comment.
Duly noted. Any further comments? Okay, Councillor Swords, is there anything further you'd like to add?
Only very briefly in response to what Councillor Lynch just said, although all these things are material considerations, there is often the need in supplementary plan documents some degree of flexibility. Of course, any such matter will be at the discretion of the committee. Having this document, bringing it forward, it's actually a far strengthened version, as you will have seen, of what came forward, I think, in 2011. And there's an update of that. So I think it should be very strongly welcomed and will make a difference in such matters.
Thank you, Councillor Swords. So I'm going to move recommendations A and B of the report. All those in favour? Agreed, thank you. Right, moving on to item 14. Contract award for external refurbishment at 19 to 22, 35 to 38, 41 to 54, 45 to 58, 158 to 161, very detailed this, 167 to 170, 189 to 192, and 198 to 201, Pottersfield. You will find that on in your pack on pages 180 to 182. And then I'm looking across to Councillor Carter to move the report.
So moved, yeah.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for the report? Thank you, Councillor Swords. Councillor Carter, to you.
Thank you. This is one of the more major projects coming out of the National Housing Capital Programme to refurbish Pottersfield flats. It's one of those key documents, or one of these key projects to not only to make the property safe, and make sure the roofs work, the walls work, and the windows work, and everything else like that, but also to generally smarten the area up as well. So many of our estates have been around for a long time and are in need of refurbishment. And it's one of the bigger works which will have quite a big impact in Pottersfield, and I'm sure the residents will be looking forward to it. Again, key element is fire safety works. I'm sure will bring reassurance to the tenants in these.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carter. Are there any questions? Councillor Lepard.
Just an observation, nothing about the proposal, just declaring an interest as Councillor Harlow.
Okay. Any questions?
Yeah, again, I just want to very strongly welcome it. It's by no means just what needs to be happened in terms of fire safety, but I think it shows when we talk about delivery that we're getting on with the job of restoring private estates, as we promised many times over. And this goes far above and beyond just the necessary things that to be done. I've since learned, not being a homeowner, what a fascious soffit is, and how it can be replaced, and how wonderful that will be for the residents of Pottersville. But it's something that should be strongly welcomed and shows that we're getting on with it.
Thank you. Anyone else with comments? Okay, I'd like to move. I would like to move recommendation A of the report. All those in favour? Agreed. Lovely. Thank you very much, Councillor Carter. Okay, item 15, partnership grant review on pages 183 to 188 of the pack. I go to Councillor Joel Charles to move the report.
Do so, move, Chair.
And can I see a seconder for the report? Doesn't have me then. Councillor Charles, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this paper and the partnership grant review is frankly a long overdue assessment of how we deploy partnership grants going forward. To take forward this review, what we decided to do as a council is to organise a workshop that the Director of Communities and Environment and the Youth and Citizenship Manager, Jamie and Christine, respectively, organised with those who have in the past been in receipt of the partnership grant and any interested parties. I think the consultation exercise was really helpful on a number of fronts. First of all, it was an opportunity to understand the priorities of, in particular, charitable organisations in the town, what they have gone through over the last 2 months, to get a sense check of their priorities matching against what we believe are emerging priorities, coupled with the community resilience strategy consultation process, which has been ongoing. And in that discussion, it was very clear that, look, and it will not surprise the Cabinet or those councillors present, that the charitable sector has gone through a very challenging time. Many of them stepping up to the plate to support those most vulnerable in our communities. And I really welcome some of the wider debate that was had in that session. It was an open, two-way conversation, and that's the focus and approach that we want to take with our engagement, not just with the charitable sector, but the wider community as a whole. As a result of all those conversations, it was very clear that the charitable sector wanted the status quo, and I very much appreciate that given the challenges that they face. But they do recognise that it's important with the money that is on offer for the partnership grants, and it's important to recognise that this partnership grants funding is separate to other pots of funding, say for example, for welfare advice in the town, the two distinct pots of money. That we need to make sure that there are, working in partnership with the charitable sector, clear targets and discernible impact as a result of doing that work. Because that benefits those charitable organisations and their beneficiaries, but it also benefits the taxpayer. They know the money that is being deployed to these charitable organisations in large is actually delivering direct impact in the town. So that's the process that we've undertaken in terms of consultation, the methodology around putting in some more targeted thoughts around how we can maximise the impact. But there are some wider considerations to bring to bear, and which we've highlighted in this report as well. Clearly, those organisations told us that they want a central function of support to access bidding opportunities, potentially pilot projects that could access further money to help them become more sustainable. And I very much see a role for this council to support the sustainability of the charitable sector and to think about how we can go ahead and support that. But clearly the overwhelming response of those groups was that it would really benefit them to have that kind of support and advice around bidding for other pots of money that are available externally. All in all, Chair, this report asks Cabinet to agree with the minor amendments to the process that we want to undertake the partnership grant, we'll see at the back of the report under Appendix A the mechanism for scoring these the applications that come into the council. But look, I very much look forward to getting on with this. It very much aligns to the focus of the community resilience strategy anyway, and this is an opportunity for us to recognise the challenges the charitable sector have gone through, and that we want to prime their endeavours going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. Are there any questions on the report? Comments? Councillor Vince.
Thank you, Chair. And you'll have to imagine that I'm Councillor Edwards for this. Councillor Edwards said he's unwell at the moment and nothing serious. But obviously with the situation, really, he didn't want to risk it. So, but obviously this is something obviously very interesting to shadow Councillor Charles. With that in mind, we welcome the proposal regarding the partnership grant review, particularly. It would be beneficial to have a new central support in order to assist in ensuring the sustainability of community and voluntary sector organisations. For example, to advise and support partners in securing long-term funding to take forward pilot projects that have been successful, but to identify potential sources of alternative funding and to generally ensure that Harlow community and voluntary organisations are well prepared for bidding opportunities as when they arise. I think that's part of the report, but I think Councillor was particularly well with that section. Years ago, the council used to have a number of community arts support officers who provided support to the voluntary sector. And the second point, it's important when agreeing funding for the voluntary sector groups that there's sufficient lead-in time going forward. So funding agreed for 2022 to 23 is important for continuality. From 2022 to 2025, it is important for continuity of services for them to be informed by January 25 whether they would continue to get funding. So I think what he's basically saying is if there's funding agreed for a set amount of time, give them sort of enough warning as to whether they're going to be able to continue to get funding so they can sort of plan their longer term strategy. I think is what Councillor was getting to on that.
If I may, Councillor Charles, what I'm going to do is see if there are any further comments there. Let's properly sum up and take on board what's just been mentioned. Are there any further comments? Okay, then I'll leave it to you, Councillor Charles, just to sum up and maybe one or two response to some of the points we've raised.
Thank you, Chair. Specifically on the points raised by the Leader of the Opposition. Clearly, one of the main discussion points when we had the consultation with the charitable groups in large was how can we deliver a central support function going forward. One of the aspects of that conversation that came up clearly was, should that sit with the council or should that sit with the voluntary sector? And that's part of an ongoing discussion with all of the charitable groups that the council has a relationship with. In the lead up to the consultation, and as we were thinking about the partnership grants, we had a number of conversations, officers and the administration, with charitable groups in the town. And the approach we want to take with the charitable community in large is to have that ongoing conversation with them about the potential for funding, our own pot of funding that we're going to kick off with the partnership grants launching. Very much welcome those applications, but any potential external funding that is available and how we can better support, structure and organise how those potentially charitable groups could join together to make bids to external pots of money. There is a wider debate in our local charitable sector about collaboration and how that's orientated so they can maximise their impact. And I think we've kick-started a very healthy conversation between the council and the charitable sector as a result. In terms of the funding pipeline prescribed within the partnership, that is something that we are going to stick to. But as I said, the wider approach here is to look at the sustainability of those organisations, taking into account the impact of the pandemic, which has hit them, their volunteers in many circumstances, and we are sensitive to those issues, and that's why we've largely stayed with the status quo of the partnership grant process and what you see in Appendix A. So I'm very much keen on continuing the conversation with the transport sector, but this is the approach that we've prescribed, something that's been sense checked with them, and they're very much, from what I understand, agree with this direction of travel. So we're going to kickstart this process and work with them going forward to improve their sustainability. And that's one of the most important aspects of this work, how we can better improve the sustainability of the wide variety of charitable organisations that are the lifeblood of our community.
Well said. So I'm going to move to recommendation A. Taking all some of the items. And I see all those in favour. Thank you very much indeed. Okay. So coming on to item 16, cabinet appointments, page 189 to 190. Any questions? Okay.
Can I make a comment?
If you'd like to make a comment.
It's not a bad one, Chair, don't worry. It really is just to congratulate the new portfolio holders on their roles. And no disrespect to James, and I've already congratulated him already, but a particular congratulations to Councillor Nikki Purse. And I'm glad that you, Chair, recognise the importance of having a woman in the Cabinet. And this isn't a political dig, because I've only got 2 women in my shadow team. We all actually need to do more to promote women in politics, and I hope that Councillor Purse can be a positive role model for women in our town. We might not agree on a lot politically, but what we both do agree on is the importance of our community. And I genuinely and sincerely wish Councillor Purse every success in her new role, and James a little bit of success too. Thank you, Chair.
Well, in many ways, it's very kind of you to make your comments, Councillor Pearce. I really wish you'd hadn't of, because now that the Cabinet members are going to expect me to be nice to them as well and praise them. So, well done to you all. In terms of women in the Cabinet, I appointed Councillor Purse, not because she's a woman, but because I thought she was the best person for the job. And whilst I recognise the need for democratic institutions to reflect the people that elect them, I wouldn't have appointed her if I didn't think she was up for the job. It's just a happy coincidence that she is also a woman. So, thank you very much for your comments, and I understand entirely where you're coming from. I just wanted to make plain that I've appointed her on merit. I'm going to put some modular officer because it doesn't, I'm assuming we're just here for noting. So, noted? Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so item 17, communications from committees, working groups, parties and panels. I'm going to take A through to C on block, if I may. Any objections to that? All in favour? Thank you very much. Item 18, minutes of panels and working groups. Item A, there's minutes of the meeting from Thursday, 7th of October 2021 of the Cabinet Policy Development Working Group on pages 257 to 259 of the pack. I'm just going to take those for noting. Noted. Item 19, matters of urgent business. I have not been made aware of any, and therefore I'm not minded to listen to any. Okay? The time now is 14 minutes past 9. Thank you all very much for your attendance. The meeting is there.